This is Keith of KeithRN. I want to thank you for your time and coming to another Facebook Live that we do once a month here on our Facebook channels, Think Like a Nurse, and our educator group, Teachers Transforming Nursing Education. It's really a pleasure to have you with us tonight. And one of the things we're going to be doing tonight that I'm really excited is that the purpose of tonight is that we really want to just have a brief introduction for you as educators to get a deeper sense of just what KeithRN is, what we're not, and how we're unique in what we do to best serve the needs of nurse educators in the marketplace and the everyday educator to help strengthen practice readiness and our graduates' preparation for practice. We're also going to talk about some of the resources and things that that we're wanting to just get a sense of getting a clear finger on the pulse of what are your needs right now in nursing education. What are some of the challenges that you're facing right now? Really more aligned with the theme of what do you need as an educator to really better prepare your graduate nurses for real world practice, developing those clinical judgment skills that align with the NCLEX, but really looking at the bigger picture, the complexities of practice, multiple patients, the complexity of patients, and all that that looks like. And so we really want to get your feedback to kind of see where you are at right now, as you especially are looking ahead towards fall and what that looks like, and really just want to get your feedback. So this is really your chance. We can't put you, it's not like a Zoom where you can speak, but you can put your responses in the chat, and we're going to have a dialogue tonight. We're just going to talk, and we're just going to have an opportunity to really interact and to better understand. And I think at the end of the day, recognize that you're not alone when it comes to the unique challenges that you face, but also what resources do you need that you don't currently have, that you wish you had? Because at KeithRN, we exist to really serve your needs and what you're wanting and what's needed to better prepare our graduates for practice. And what I just like to share and just open for the first few minutes, for those that aren't familiar with KeithRN, my name is Keith. I am the Keith of KeithRN, and I've been on this journey for 12 years. And kind of what makes me, I think, a little bit unique in the educator marketplace is that I've been an RN at the bedside for 36 years, but as a nurse educator, I never left the bedside, as I was blessed to have a Baylor weekend position and working those 12-hour nights on the weekend, transition on Sunday, and then again teach in the classroom on Monday morning. It was a challenge, but I love teaching and I loved education. One thing I did forget to share, though, I'd love to get your names and those that are joining us live, because this recording also lives on our YouTube channel, Think Like a Nurse. But we also would like to welcome you warmly. So those that are here, please put your name in the chat. Carol is with us again. Carol, I don't know, I'm not going to call you a stalker, but you're close, and that's okay. So it's good to have you here, and would love to introduce and warmly welcome those that are joining us live, especially on we have a beautiful summer evening here. I just got back watching my grandsons play t-ball, and I hope we're all enjoying your summers as well. And those that have a break, I hope you're enjoying it. So great to have you, Tanya. We have connected. What a pleasure to have you here tonight. Melanie from South Carolina. Angie, blessings. Yes, these are some familiar names, so it's great to have you with us. But what I would just kind of like to share, just again, for those of you that aren't familiar with KeithRN, is that really, I'm not a traditional business in the nurse educator space, but really my passion has always been over the last 12 years to have a platform for a purpose to bring about needed change in nursing education. And, it's not about the NCLEX. And I think, that culture of NCLEX success, and yes, we need our students to pass the NCLEX, but most importantly, they must be prepared to provide safe patient care and developing those clinical judgment skills and other practical skills essential for a successful transition to professional practice. So kind of think of KeithRN as a boutique brand. I know many of you love Etsy. Well, why do you like Etsy? Because it's not Walmart. It's not a supercenter. They're high quality, unique, innovative craft or other resources that you're looking for that you can't get anywhere else. And really, that's the essence of KeithRN, as we have developed a wide variety of tools and resources to better prepare our graduates for practice with case-based learning and practical application. But really, this is about you tonight. But I want you to kind of get a sense of just, my story as an educator at the bedside, and really the vision and mission of KeithRN has always been to transform nursing education. This book rocked my world 14 years ago when it first came out. Dr. Benner's work and the co-authors on Educating Nurses, a call for radical transformation. And, Dr. Benner laid it on the line for us as educators 14 years ago that we must radically change how nursing is taught. And it's been a journey for many of us. Each of us have our own struggle with TWATI, the way we've always done it, and the unique challenges we all face and the high stresses. But there is a clear path to transforming and improving practice readiness. And Dr. Benner's work has really been a part of that. But as you look at KeithRN and the resources that I've developed that are really unique in the educator space, our passion is really to transform nursing education one educator at a time. And for those of you that are here tonight, you are part of that transformation. And it's kind of like, my passion as I look up over the last 12 years is literally to create a movement of nurse educators who have come out of the matrix. They see what is true. They know what needs to be done differently, but they might be thinking a lot of things that nobody else is thinking or saying. I hope that I can be that voice and advocate for you and really say, you're not crazy. If you're seeing some of the things, it's like, why are we doing it that way? Why do we teach 120 assessment skills when a student only needs 25 to 30 for safe practice, and what that looks like? And so my passion has always been to help realize the transformation that Dr. Benner advocated 14 years ago that we're still working towards. We're not there yet. So we need to continue. And I pray that I can be a fearless leader that kind of brings us to that place and what that looks like. And, the other challenges we face is not only to transform, but we must ask ourselves, why do we want to transform? It's because we have a gap between how nursing is taught and practiced. And we need to bridge that gap by, again, implementing educational best practices. And that's where Dr. Benner's work and other current strategies to better prepare our graduates for practice. It's my passion to make that practical and to realize that. And we must also never forget that this gap that is present in too many programs ultimately impacts patient outcomes, leading to failure to rescue, leading to dead patients who died unnecessarily before their time. And that happens way too often. And failure to rescue is something that we must work to eradicate and to strengthen, again, our practice readiness and what that looks like. And so, as you look at, my passion and what KeithRN does, I really want to kind of just highlight the values that I really just want you all to understand is really my passion to better serve your needs. And one of the things that I really have embraced for the 12 years that I've been on this journey with KeithRN is to lead by serving. As a Christian, I love the example of Jesus, and although he was a king, he served, and he served sacrificially. And that's my heart as a nurse educator for the needs that you have in the marketplace, is to just, I've got hundreds of blog articles on KeithRN, other videos on the YouTube channel, to really the resources in the membership, or even that you can get some free downloads, to lead by serving because you have needs, and to provide that care and to shepherd the educators, because there's a lot of voices out there saying, do this, do that. Some of those are educational best practices, some are not. And so we need to really just, I hope I can be and humbly be a clarion call to just what is needed for such a time as this in nursing education. And I want us to also recapture the centrality of the patient in patient care. We talk about it with QSIN, but let's help our students see that the patient is central. The outcomes of that patient, the value that the responsibility that we have as educators to hold that patient's life in our hands, and to really do it with a spirit of caring and compassion, not out of duty and obligation. And, we want our students to have that essence of a professional identity. What does it mean to be a nurse? It's not something that you do. A lot of students think it's just another job. Pays well. Yes, I can do this. But really, we want our students to have a clear sense of their identity as a professional nurse and what that means, what it embodies. You don't cheat. You have integrity, honesty, serving, caring, compassion, presence, and all that the art of nursing as well as the thinking of nursing embodies. And so we really want to help our students embody that. And KeithRN has got numerous resources, case studies, and other things that I've derived from my lens of clinical practice to best serve your needs. And so, that's really the essence of just kind of, what makes KeithRN kind of unique in this space. And I know that those that are here today, some of you are familiar with my work and some of you may not. But what I wanted to kind of bring in here is that we're going to start with the dialogue and we're going to start talking, because really what this is about, I'm going to bring in our nurse educator consultant, Dr. Maria Flores Harris. And Maria, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, Maria, why don't you just introduce yourself to those that may not be familiar with you, share your role within KeithRN, and I want you then to begin to kind of start the dialogue with some of the questions, challenges, and the things that we want to derive from our audience, because we don't have a formal advisory board yet. But until we do, this audience, those that are here today live, you're advising us. We want to get your feedback, your guidance, and really what are what do you need that you wish you had? And we'll go deeper in all these different things. So we have a fun conversation, and this is all about you tonight as nurse educators. So as the chat, we've got a lot of educators here tonight. Maria, I'm so blessed to have them. And I'll let you start from here and just kind of show your role within KeithRN and how, what you do to serve the needs of educators. And then we'll just jump right into these questions.
Well, as Keith mentioned, I am the nurse educator consultant for KeithRN. I am a nurse educator myself, and I've worked as a nurse consultant for, I guess, really almost the past 15 years. I have been in RN programs, PM programs, directors, and like many of us on this call, I'm sure we've had a lot of different roles in both nursing and nursing education. But I've been with Keith now for a while, and sorry, I'm hearing a little bit of an echo, but okay, it's gone away.
Okay.
My role at KeithRN is to support our partners. And I do that by helping you with implementation, integration, answering questions, orienting you to our resources, and really just being a support of any kind. I can tell you, I've had people set up meetings, and we have just had basically meetings like this where we've talked and they've asked questions. They've told me about their challenges and their struggles, and we've talked about what we have that can help them with their challenges and struggles. And if we didn't have something, but I knew of something else, I was happy to give resources. So that's really what I'm here for, as a resource. I am a lifelong learner. I'm constantly reading, and I don't read for fun. I read things like this.
How learning works.
Yeah. I read things like that for fun. So I do have a lot of resources at my fingertips to help people, and I enjoy doing that. That's what I love to do. That's something that I think we can't do as educators when we are, I'm going to say, in the fire, when we're actually in the classroom and we have a full load and we're teaching in the classroom and we're doing clinical and we're responsible for having office hours and all these other things that we have to do as instructors and as professors. We don't have the time sometimes to sit and read articles and to research things. And I am blessed that I do have the time now, or I at least make the time, because that's part of my job. And so I'm happy to share those resources and the things that I know that are out there to help our customers. So that is my role. What I would like to do is open it up to questions. And Lori, I see you have a comment. No release time. So Lori is agreed. 8 students in a clinical group, on and on. Oh, you're doing good, Lori, if you have 8. I usually had 10.
Yes, all right. All right. Yep.
But please do drop your comments in. And the first question that I have, so I'm going to put the question out and I want you guys to please answer it in the chat. What are your challenges and your struggles in nursing education? So drop those in the chat, if you will, and let's discuss them and talk about ways that maybe we can help, or talk about future products and resources and services that we need to create to help you. While we're waiting for comments to come in, I do want to say that I see several people in the chat who I know, and I want to say, as soon as I saw your names come up, it just brings a smile to my face. So thank you for joining us. Thank you all for joining us. But it is so nice to connect with people from across the country that I know and that I've had relationships with. As Keith mentioned, this really is kind of an informal advisory board for us. We've been talking about, what do we want to do next year, the next 5 years? What is KeithRN going to look like? And as Keith mentioned, he and I both have a heart for service. We've both been in nursing for a while. This is my 30th year in nursing. It's hard for me to say that. I can't believe it. But nursing has been good to us, and it's time for us to give back. And that's what we want to do. And so that's why we want to hear from you. What are your challenges? What are your struggles? What are your needs? Maybe it's not a challenge and a struggle. It's just something you need. But what can we do? What can we develop? What can we tell you about maybe that we already have that can help you? So I see some people putting some things in the chat.
I'll kind of moderate, Maria, and
Yeah.
we'll both kind of jump in and respond, but I'm going to kind of let you take the initiative here. And
So
I'll just
Debbie, I believe Debbie and I touched base earlier today, if this is the same Debbie. So it is good to see you again, Debbie. I must not have bored you to death this morning. So thank you for coming tonight. Debbie, I would love for you to elaborate. I hear you saying having all faculty on the same page. I'd like for you to elaborate a little bit on that, if you will, because one thing that comes to mind for me, one thing that I hear over and over and over is I have some faculty that want to do active learning and some faculty that do not. And that can cause some, let's say, concerns in programs. So tell me specifically what you're talking about when you say on the same page, because if it's that, we will certainly get into that. So just elaborate a little bit more, Debbie. Lori, I see that you have one issue is having the time to integrate new products.
You think that there's almost too many products, Maria, in the marketplace that creates confusion and overwhelms us as educators?
Lori, again, feel free to elaborate on that as well. Yeah, but Keith, I would say that is something actually that I hear. I will not name company names, but I hear sometimes from people that use certain companies that they have 1,000 products and I don't even know what they have, much less the time to use them. So Lori, yes. So Lori says, yes, exactly. Some faculty like to do what they are comfortable with versus what is best for the student. So let's dig into that a little bit, Lori, and we'll come back and be sure that we answer all these questions. But let's.
Can I jump in, Maria? I have just one thought I'd love to share.
No, go.
There's a theme between what Lori is sharing and what Debbie shared about getting faculty on the same page. And this is something that as nurse educators, we must never forget. Educational best practices as a nurse educator are not optional. When you look at active learning and the data that supports case-based learning, active learning, and the strategies that go along with it versus lecture only, that's no longer that has been resolved. And it's educational best practice to make learning active, in short. And just as a nurse in practice doesn't have the option to disregard clinical best practices like using alcohol wipes to swab your ports versus CHG or chlorhexidine, when that evidence came out 14, 15 years ago, I didn't have the option to just disregard that and say, I like alcohol. It smells better. I like it. I'm familiar with it. It's the way I've always done it. It's not optional in clinical practice. And as educators, we really need to just hold our colleagues accountable. I think all of you are part of this change. But we have our colleagues who, for various reasons, resist that change. But if you're in leadership, especially, you're the sheriff in town. And these educational best practices that embody case-based and active learning and other strategies to improve practice readiness, it really shouldn't be optional. And I don't know how this culture in nursing education, academic freedom, doesn't give you the freedom to disregard educational best practices. Maria, any
That's
thoughts?
it. And I will say this for those of you that may be struggling with that issue, I've actually put together a document on evidence for case-based learning and active learning. And it's the evidence that it's just basically some points, and then it's a lot of references, up-to-date studies, research, best practices. And I am happy to share that. It's just a Word document that I put together. I am happy to share that with you guys because, as I said, that is the question that I always get is, how do I convince students that this is best for them? How do I convince my colleagues? How do I convince administration? So I'm happy to share that document with you. And what I would ask you to do, probably the easiest thing to do, is just email me at maria@KeithRN.com. And we'll put up our emails at the end here, but feel free to email me and I'm happy to share that document. And Keith, I wanted to, guys, I'm going to go ahead and kind of throw some things up and let Keith keep talking. But I wanted Lori, and I saw a couple of other of you. There's another Lori who actually said also that, yes, there are way too many products being thrown at us and we don't have time to master them. So I'd like to speak to that for a moment because several of you are agreeing that there's just way too much out there. I'm going to say this and turn it over to you, Keith, because I know you have a lot more to say on this.
Yeah.
Choose the products that are evidence-based and that you know are practices that you should be using, and choose the ones that you like, that you're comfortable with, that work for you, and don't worry about the rest. That's honestly my advice.
Yeah, and you know what I would add to that, Maria, you're spot on, is that just think about this as every educator who is attending this live and those that listen to the record, I have just a real simple mantra: practice, practice. Practice. The thinking of practice is the essence of active learning. And really, when you look at the literature, and when I did my dissertation 4 years ago, there is one resource and one pedagogy that rises above all else as it relates to active learning. And it's not escape rooms. It's the essence of an unfolding case-based simulation or a case study that unfolds like practice. But now this is the key. Most of the products in the marketplace, yeah, we have case studies. Many of them are multiple choice items. And they're really like a test. They're just like, okay, here's the choices for question one. Anything that has a multiple choice item prepares your students to pass a test. It doesn't prepare them in the same way for real world practice because no patient has 4 items on their head, select all that apply, multiple choice. You either know it or you don't. That's the reality of real world nursing practice. So therefore, the questions we use in our case studies that replicate the thinking of practice must also be open-ended without a multiple choice item. So really, when you look at the case studies that I've been writing for the last 12 years, that's really unique in the marketplace. They're all open-ended. They use Tanner's clinical judgment model, which aligns with the NGN model, step by step, open-ended responses and others. And so we really, when you look at the literature, case studies, there's so many things we can do as educators, and some of them are kind of, games and other things, but you know what? The foundation, what I've shared at conferences across the country, and I still stand by, When you look at active learning strategies, yes, mix it up, and there's a lot of ways to do it, but the foundation of your active learning pedagogy in your classroom consistently, I would say 75% of the time, should be some form of a case-based or practice-based, simulation that brings in the thinking of practice so it can be practiced. And it doesn't have to be complicated. And so I would just kind of throw that out, Maria, as just kind of,
Yeah.
to give it that we don't have to make it so hard. I think as educators and our vendors that are out there, they give us so much and we just get burdened by it. And I'm just kind of like want to ease that burden off of every educator and say, that's why I've always focused on case studies with KeithRN. That's kind of my boutique brand. And they're really more like, I would call them not case studies, because Maria says, you know what, they're really not case studies, Keith. They are so different. We kind of are going to be looking at just rebranding them, but calling them practice simulations, because they really replicate that thinking of practice by bringing in audio sounds and open-ended questions, images of practice, so we can practice. So look at your active learning strategy. So what I would say to you as educators who've got a whole plethora of options with your vendors, do they really practice the thinking of practice authentically? If they do, use it. If they don't, just kind of like, this is your standard, and just use that to winnow anything that doesn't really practice the thinking of practice the way a nurse will experience it in practice. That's 3 practices. So that's your gold standard. If it meets that standard, great. If it doesn't, then you need to look elsewhere. And we've got a lot of resources, but this focus is on what you're needing and wanting. But just that would be my editorial insights.
Well, I want you to continue, because I'm bringing up Beth's comment here.
Yeah, Beth,
this falls right in line with what you're talking about, practicing practice and 30-page care plans. So Beth says, I'm advancing my no clinical paperwork to a brand new scoring system. I'm excited to share grading on performance instead of clinical paperwork. Can you speak to how performance ready is so important rather than simply clinical care plans?
Yes. And, this is really where it comes down to clinical. Beth, I just want to say thank you for the innovative work that you have done on this idea of no clinical paperwork and an oral care plan. And Beth has done a couple of blog articles for KeithRN in the last couple of years, and so I just want to commend. If I can find those links, Maria, I will throw them in the chat. But for right now,
okay.
Beth is asking a really important question, and let me. I lost my train of thought, Mary. Can you put it back? I want to catch that last sentence.
Yeah, sorry.
I make sure I answer it very directly.
Absolutely. It was really about grading about performance rather than on clinical care plans.
Yes. And, this is where we really need to be very clear. And this is why we must adopt in our programs a clinical judgment model. Because Tanner's framework, I will say of all the, it's the most popular framework used where programs adopt a framework, but we really must have a practice-informed clinical judgment model that we can use to evaluate, for example, with Tanner's framework that speaks the language of practice because it came from practice, that we, in essence, those noticing skills. Look at your students' nursing assessment. How are they doing with noticing? What did they notice?
Oh, Keith froze on us. He'll be back in a second. This happens sometimes.
All right, I'll slow down.
Okay, you're back, Keith.
Tell me when I'm back. All right. So really what Beth is saying, look at a clinical judgment model that speaks the language of practice, which is really Tanner's clinical judgment model. I'll just be honest, that's the model we should be using across nursing education, bar none. The NGN model comes from Tanner's, but it doesn't speak the language of practice. We shouldn't be asking our students, what's your hypothesis? What cues did you recognize? Or, and it just, we want to speak that. But when you look at the essence of Tanner's and holding our students accountable to really prepare them for practice, each of those clinical reasoning steps, what are you noticing? That's most important. And again, you can do this verbally. So what Beth does with her strategy, she just basically goes through Tanner's clinical judgment model step by step and asking her students, Step one, what are you noticing that is most important here? And have your students reflect and have dialogue. Why is that important? Like, why does that heart rate of 120, why is that important? That's the interpretation, step two of Tanner's. Then what does it mean? How are you going to respond as a nurse? What's your nursing priority, plan of care, nursing interventions that are priorities? And that's your step three. And step four is, okay, it's end of the clinical day. Tell me what you evaluated with your students, the nursing process, or with the patient. And then again, you just are having a consistent standard where your students are going to know every clinical. They're going to be asked, what are you noticing? What does it mean? How are you going to respond? And then evaluating, trending your data. How did your patient respond? Where's their heart rate now? Where's their temperature now? And what does that mean? And we can do this verbally. So that's the genius of Beth's strategy, that by the end of that fourth semester in a typical program, there's no paperwork except a patient care, just a cheat sheet, just what a nurse uses that I use as well, a 1 or 2 page, data collection, and everything else is verbal. That's the path. And I love that, Beth. And thank you for what you're doing to innovate clinical education. But that's the kind of practice that is based on performance that we can evaluate in real time. Are they meeting those standards of basic metrics of noticing, interpreting, responding, reflecting? And that's what we must reinforce every clinical to strengthen practice readiness. That's going to transition that thinking. It's like a rut that they get established. They will adapt that to every patient. And that's why the case studies, even with KeithRN, use the same questions for every 100 plus topics. We use the same questions for every topic because the thinking of practice doesn't change despite the context of where you practice as a nurse. And so that would just be my thoughts, Maria, with that. And I hope that makes sense.
Appreciate that. I want to, we've addressed this pretty much, but I love what Debbie says here. And I had to put it up because Debbie says there are some faculty who want 30-page nursing care plans in clinical, yet they don't have the time to use active learning in the classroom. And so, Debbie, you can say to those people now that if they will decrease their nursing care plans to a few pages or even no care plan at all and just do some paperwork or verbal, then they'll have time to actually put evidence-based practice in their classroom. So I just wanted to bring that up because it's almost absurd that we're still asking our students to complete 20 and 30-page care plans. And that means that we have to take the time to grade them.
Yeah.
So of course we don't have time for anything else if we're looking at 30 pages of care plans for 10 students at a time.
And that's a classic example as well, Maria, of what the literature, Kavanaugh study, infobesity. And when we have TMI, well, we must remember the science of learning, like the book Maria mentioned, How Learning Works. There's a science of learning theory called cognitive load. And it simply means that there's only so much information your prefrontal cortex can process in a lecture, in your clinical paperwork. And when you are asking so much information, learning actually decreases. Less content and essential knowledge will actually deepen the level of knowledge of what's most important. So though we're well-intended, too much lecture, too much clinical paperwork actually decreases learning. So teaching less, having less clinical paperwork of what is most important. And I have a clinical paperwork, clinical judgment paperwork in our membership. It's 5 pages that you can use across fundamentals to the end of the program if you choose to. 5 pages. If your paperwork is more than 5 to 7 pages, it's infobesity. And you need to change that before the fall. So just a call to action to those that are struggling in your program. If you can make that change happen, please do it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm going to put Lori's comment here because Lori says that she looks like she's done some good work here, trying to influence student success with students who arrive unprepared for the rigor of the program, and that she just completed a guide to success for their nursing program as their sabbatical project. And she's trying to prepare students in clinical and provide them with a robust, meaningful experience while maintaining patient safety. And she's asking, obviously all of this was not going on the screen here, but she's asking, I need tips for feeling like I made a difference in clinical. It was not just running from the time I arrived until signing off notes at 11 p.m. So, Keith, I immediately go to our post clinical activities and reflection and such. But I'll let you take that. She's basically saying, I need tips to feel like I've made a difference in clinical, and I'm assuming so students know what they've learned and that they've made a difference. Yeah.
No, great point, Lori. And this is really what when I was clinical teaching, what I made time for every clinical, whether I had 8 or 10 students, I had 10 consistently, is that the most important thing for any clinical educator to do every clinical is that you've got to do what Beth Corner does. Now, you're going to have clinical paperwork, but you have got to basically take at least 10 minutes personal with every student every week and make that time so that you are doing a fire drill of clinical reasoning questions at least once, preferably twice throughout your clinical day, where you're asking, okay, you just did your assessment in the first 1 to 2 hours. What did you notice in your assessment, in your vital signs that was most important? What does that data mean? And then follow it up as you approach the last 2 hours of clinical. Okay, your data was initially this. Now, what was your second set of data collected as you're approaching evaluation and the end of the shift, trending that data, and then asking implications. Okay, what does that mean? Look at the medical record together. Look at the current labs in the medical record. Look at the current progress note by the provider as well. Highlight what, our students, they don't know what to look at. They just see a medical record and think it's all relevant, but you're the expert, Lori. And so therefore, go through the medical record and spend spend as much time as you're able, at least 3 to 5 minutes, highlighting from the progress note of the provider, the labs today. Make sure that they are noticing what you are noticing as an expert nurse, because we're the experts. We have to embrace our experience and help our students, guide them, not to judge them because of what they don't know. We are their mentor. And so, Lori, the short answer to that is that I don't care what their clinical paperwork is. You know what? Your students can fudge it. If they're having to turn a 30-page care plan in or however long it is, 1 or 2 days later, they can make half of it up because they have all the time in the world. Your goal is that day, as part of clinical, you make it a priority that the most important thing that you can do as a clinical educator is to have that personal debriefing, one-on-one, going through the chart as well as your fire drill of clinical reasoning questions based on Tanner's, and just go through those steps, asking them, getting the dialogue, mentoring. If you do that and you contribute to their learning and you correct errors in their thinking in real time, you have made a difference. You have now added a step to their progression as a nurse. And if we do that every clinical from semester 1 to semester 4 or 5, it'll be like this. And you can be confident that they are not just going through the motions, filling out your care plans, because that's not where the learning takes place. It's what are they really thinking as they reason in action, which is what every nurse must do to be safe. And that must be practiced as well. So we must have that personal time every time that we have clinical with our students. It's not just 4 students getting that. Every student needs to have 10 minutes of our undivided attention where we can basically just have that time to dialogue together. So Marie, that's my
and I just wanted to post this, that Lori actually came back and said, I'm going to start doing walking rounds with my group and have each student present the priority of care for their patient, trending what they are seeing, cues, and how to prevent complications, decline in status. Perfect.
No, and the most important clinical judgment or reasoning skill to prevent failure to rescue, to notice problems early, is the higher level skill. It's under the interpreting umbrella. It's noticing, then interpreting, is the ability to trend and compare our clinical data from what is most recent to the current and what direction are they going. And that's a higher level skill, but that when a student can notice and then interpret that trend, that's where failure to rescue can come to a complete halt, and a nurse will call the provider saying, I'm concerned about that. And that's been practiced. And so, Lori, that's that trending skill is something we must embed in every student, that you are always comparing most recent to current of lab values, vital signs, assessment data throughout your 6-hour clinical or an 8-hour or 12-hour shift in practice. If we can teach that, we will have made such an incredible difference that they're going to be much safer if you've had that debriefing, especially in clinical. So I love the idea of what she shared about nursing grand rounds, Maria.
Yeah.
And really just that's the medical model. See, the medical model of education, it's case-based. It's case-based in medical education and med school, and then it's patient-centered case studies, or patient grand rounds are just real-world case studies. So if medical education is using it to prepare their practitioners for practice, nursing education, we're not any different. We're the practice-based profession, but we're slow on the curve, and the quality of our case studies aren't as good as they could be. And I just tried to create a better mousetrap with what I do with KeithRN, Maria. So yeah, I can get, you can fire me up here. So I need to
we have another question, and I think we have a solution for this.
All right.
As a clinical instructor, I feel, this is from Melanie, I feel like we are on a lone island. We're not treated like staff and have nearly no resources. As a new clinical instructor, having a full-time staff mentor would be so helpful. What have you seen that works to support adjunct clinical instructors grow and stay on the same page as their didactic counterparts?
Oh boy. That's a great question. And this is one of the weaknesses in nursing education right now, is that you can have an expert staff nurse, but they are not consistently mentored and know how to manage 8 or 10 students in clinical. Is totally different than being a nurse in practice. And so oftentimes our clinical faculty and a clinical education is where the rubber meets the road. We cannot squander that opportunity. We must be consistent. I'll be honest with you. Right now, Maria, we're not doing a good job with that in nursing education, as well as I think the companies that serve nurse educators. And I will share this. We are in the process of developing a very innovative resource to standardize clinical education at an affordable price point for anybody who wants it. And so I saw that need years ago. We're getting much closer to seeing that developed and delivered later this year. So I would just say, stay tuned, educators. Let be known that, the things that are in my heart, as well as having some other some of the leading authorities in nursing education are helping me to collaborate on this project. And so something very good is coming. And so right now it's a hodgepodge. It's messy. And yes, I've got blog articles on KeithRN. If you go to KeithRN.com and go to the articles under communication, or I do believe that footer, I've got hundreds of articles, many on clinical education that I've written over the years that will be helpful, including Beth's content, Beth Corner's articles on no clinical paperwork. So be sure to check that out. But yeah, voiceover PowerPoints on clinical education don't cut it. And that's the standard, unfortunately, for a lot of that we get. And so I'm hoping to improve that. And we've got to educate the educator, and especially the clinical adjunct who is not an educator. They're just an expert nurse. That's awesome. But that's a gap. And I'm excited to address that gap and hope to have something for us all soon. So thank you.
Yes, I thought that would be a good plug for that, because it's good stuff coming. So Lisa Miller says that I would love to use a case study for certain topics, but feel awkward like an imposter when I teach it. And she clarifies that in a previous comment by saying that I would like to see a video of one of y'all using a case study that has content you're not an expert in. My background is maternity, but I also teach some psych and sexuality. And I think that imposter syndrome, we've all felt it, I believe, and we've all, I'm sure, been asked to teach things that we are not experts in. For anybody that knows me even a little bit, you know that maternity is not my thing. I don't know anything about maternity. I remember nothing. I did the get it, spit it, forget it method of study when it came to maternity because it was not my jam. I had no intention to spend my days with women giving birth, but I was asked to teach it one semester, help teach it. And Lisa, I felt like a total imposter. Keith, I would love for
Yeah,
you, if you have any pointers for
yeah,
her.
I do. I got a couple of
What it
pointers.
feels like.
Yeah, and that is so true. And one of the things that I noticed as a new educator before there even was a KeithRN, but just a very passionate, everyday educator, just like all of you, was that the case-based resources, I knew the value of case studies, reading Benner's work, and just my common sense. The case studies that were available even today, where's the answers? Where's the answers? They weren't there. They just didn't provide them. You had to either know it or you don't. So that reinforces imposter syndrome. So I will say this to you. When I began KeithRN and writing case studies, even though it took me a ton of work, in addition to the student version, there is a fully developed answer key with the rationale and what is the correct answer with these open-ended questions. So I would say to you that with KeithRN case studies, you have an answer key. So that will take about 75 to 90% of your angst away. When you have your version, when you have a fully developed answer key with the students, then you just pick out what questions you want to use. No imposter syndrome. The other thing that I would commend you to is that on our YouTube channel, Think Like a Nurse, I've got some videos of going through some of my unfolding case studies, going through a skinny reasoning case study in real time, and just kind of just authentically sharing some of the specific topics and just, just so you know my language, a skinny reasoning is about 20 questions that are open-ended in a consistent framework. Unfolding are more advanced in about 40 questions that have a problem recognition, unfolding change of status. And so they're just a more complex for advanced students. So the case studies that I've written level the content to the level of the student, which is common sense. But again, I don't see that in most case-based resources in the marketplace. And so those are the two things that I could just commend right away that she should be aware of. And if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat.
So we do have a question here from Linda. How well are clinical faculty balancing assessing clinical reasoning with skill competency assessment?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I would like, Keith, before you kind of chime in, if any of you would like to answer that question, do so in the chat. We would love to hear what you have to say about that as well.
Yeah, one thing that I would say about that, Linda, that's a wonderful question. And what I would encourage us to recognize is that when you look at Tanner's framework as an organizing framework of clinical judgment, because each of those reasoning steps of noticing, interpreting, responding, reflecting, those are clinical, those are also competencies that we can use as a framework. So let me give you an example. Noticing isn't just saying, what are you noticing about your patient today? You know what a noticing skill competency is? How does your student do a head-to-toe assessment? So assessing the fluency and the proficiency of their head-to-toe assessment and using Tanner's clinical judgment model to kind of structure the competencies that are the skills that align with the thinking and the judgment is powerful. And so one example, like I shared, noticing, make sure that if you're a clinical educator, you must make your first week of clinical all about taking 5 to 10 minutes to watch your students' assessment of their patient as a fly on the wall. In that first 1 to 2 hours, the very first week of on-site clinical, you want to make sure that your students are doing head-to-toe assessment as fluently. Now, they're going to be slow, but we want to be able to basically make it clear that's a noticing skill. That's a noticing competency. And so that's just an example of how you can use Tanner's framework to align some of the skills of practice as it relates to, the prioritization, like what do you do first? So like that responding skill, prioritization. You've got 2 or 3 things to do. What do you do first and why? And this is where, if we can have dialogue with our students, we can be developing, I think the clinical judgment competencies are our first priority, but then those skills that we expect that our students must master, look at Tanner's framework and see how the competencies can fit under one of those 4 umbrellas. And that will give you a kind of a unified, holistic approach to clinical evaluation. Just a thought to consider.
Yeah, thank you. I've gone through the chat. I think we've answered all the questions. We've discussed everything there. If I missed anything, guys, just drop it back in the chat right now, and I will certainly bring it up. But if I feel like we touched on everything, Keith, I wanted to. We've got a good 10 minutes left. I wanted to drop some things in the chat, like the clinical judgment course, because I feel like that addresses a lot of what we talked about tonight, and talk about our membership and such. So if you want to do that, and I'm happy to drop some of these things in the chat.
Yeah, why don't we start, Maria, with the Educator Guide to Develop Clinical Judgment.
Okay.
And so really what I just want to highlight, it's kind of like, I hear your pain points, and you know what? I've been hearing these pain points for the last 10 years. And so what's kind of cool, I don't think it's cool. That's the wrong word. What's interesting is that I'm hearing the same things that I've been hearing ever since I began my journey with KeithRN. And I think that this tells us that we haven't fixed what needs to be fixed yet in nursing education. So, I want to thank you all for just who've attended this live, taking time out of your schedule. I hear you, Maria hears you, and we are committed to, again, creating some innovative resources to address these. But what I'd like to share in closing is, again, like Maria said, we have some powerful resources that if you're not familiar with, you need to be aware with. And the first one is free. And about 3 months ago, I developed an online course called An Educator Guide to Develop Clinical Judgment, Practical Steps to Close the Academic Practice Gap. And so in this course, the introduction and part 1 are completely free. Okay, it has got quality recent literature of up to this year on just what is it that we need to do differently to improve practice readiness and to close the academic practice gap. Parts 2 and 3 that go into specific information on clinical transformation and classroom transformation. And that's a whole nother ballgame we didn't really even talk about, because that's where many of us are struggling the most, is how do we go from, that lecture lecture only to the classroom, or to the active learning and to the case-based and other ways to practice. That course basically has got 5.4 CEs, and it's a reasonable price point of less than $50. Maria's thrown in a coupon code for 20% off. You know what? If you're looking for a summer read that can save lives with your students and how you teach, this is a very powerful and practical resource that I would say is a need to have. I spent so many hours in collaborating with expert educators to develop this course. That's where I would love you to start, because really what you need to do is that once you recognize the problem, you see, and this is where many of us in nursing education are. They think everything's fine. I just want to lecture. I like lecturing. And they just want to do it the way it's always been done. But for those of you that know there's a better way and that there is a problem that we need to address, this Nurse Educator Guide is crucial. And I would love for anyone just to get the free version to get started. Just that's my gift to you. And then basically, if you want to go deeper and want the CEs, then just get the paid version, use the coupon, and it is an incredible value that you'll appreciate and put to good use. The next step that I would like us as educators to consider, many of you saw that I'm thankful to see that many are using the membership platform. One of the things that I did early on with KeithRN, I wrote case studies after case study after case study, and you had a price point for this one, a price point for this one. And I then had 50 case studies, 75 case studies on my store. It was too much. And then about 6 years ago, I had an insight. How about putting these in an affordable membership platform that an educator can have access to: the student version, the answer key, and additional handouts, the things that we talked about with student learning in the clinical. We've got about 24 worksheets and over 350 unfolding case studies in an all-inclusive membership platform that you can go month to month at less than $60. Get the first month half price using the coupon code if you're not a current member. The other thing that we offer is a program membership at a significant discount. You can also go an annual at a much lower price point, or a program membership, and that's where Maria's services come in. That if you have a program that would just like a demo, you know what, we have you know, Maria is available, and you should share your email, Maria, here on the screen to just basically pop that on. She's our educator consultant. We're small, but we're nimble. And Maria does an incredible job to show any program how to have a curricular solution to developing clinical judgment, practice readiness, active learning. Like the old commercials for Visa, you know what? There are certain things that, because of the value, they literally are priceless. And you know what? This resource is much lower than anything in the market for what we provide. And it would be an invaluable addition to just, you know, strengthening the active case-based learning for any program. And so our program membership can be done at a discount. But if you're an individual educator, you know, what's kind of cool about KeithRN, I want to change nursing education one educator at a time. So you don't have to adopt our whole at a program level to get the resources. You can just be one person saying, I want to change. The individual, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be an entire program like most other vendors to get their umbrella of resources. And so we have both options, individual or program, and we're available to serve your needs there. And yeah, and Lori, you know, thanks for the word of mouth. You know, we appreciate that. It's really our passion to do that. But the membership platform, really, if you're looking for a way to operationalize, it'll save you hours of time every month. More importantly, your students get access at no additional cost. See, I'm kind of weird in the marketplace. I'm not charging students for the case-based resources. I'm charging educators or the program so they can teach more effectively. I have always been educator focused. I'm one of you. I'm not just you know, trying to create the most revenue so I can be making a lot more money. Well, I learned that the hard way. I really don't care. I want to bring about needed change, and so your students get access at no additional cost. So the membership platform, I would say, if you're kind of like new to KeithRN, just get the educator guide. See the vision, see what's there, understand kind of what's in my heart and just how it really does align with educational best practices, because there's nothing special about Keith. I'm really just taking educational best practices and doing my best through my lens of practice as a nurse educator who never left the bedside in 36 years to help connect and bridge the gap and do it in a way that's authentic and makes sense. And that's what educators value about KeithRN. It's practical, easy to use. It lays the foundation of active learning. That's where the membership is your best resource for those of you that want to take the next step and go all in. And the program membership is golden, because then your entire program benefits, not just an individual. So if you're an individual educator and you're using it and like it, you need to reach out to Maria. And she would love to do a demo, no obligation to your program, at a next staff meeting when the fall comes or whenever that could happen, and just let the program see what we have to offer and let a decision be made, whatever it might be. It's totally up to you.
And I'm leaving my email up there for that reason. Please feel free to contact me. Also, if you want that document that I spoke of, feel free to contact me for that as well. And Keith, I'm putting one more link in, and this is our Facebook Live application to be a guest. If I'm just dropping it in the chat.
Yes, we want, you know what? KeithRN has never been about Keith, okay? I want it to be, even though people recognize me if I go to a conference, it's humbling. But I'm a little uncomfortable with it. I don't need it, I don't want it, but I'm thankful that I'm serving your needs. The bottom line is we want to feature other educators on our Facebook Lives. If you have got an innovative insight like Beth Corner, she's been a Facebook Live guest. She has shared her strategies with her department. If you've got something innovative or something that is passionate to you, we've got a simple application form. Please, I would love to have your insights, because there's a lot of untapped talent. Educators are inherently gifted. They're inherently creative. And I know there's a lot of stuff that you're doing out there that hasn't been recognized, but you'd like to get it out there. This is your chance to be kind of like a podium presentation at a conference. By the time that we do this Facebook Live, we've got a great attendance tonight. It's not uncommon by the time a week goes by, we have 500, 1,000, 1,500 views. That's that's more views than you'll get at the NLN. Okay, so again, we want to feature and really promote what you do. And Maria, if you want to build community, do you want to put those links out there and just
I will.
yeah, and we'll just close with the fact that really what I'm about and what me and Maria are doing together is to really build a movement that's a community that supports educators, a community where we're accessible to you. We're not in our ivory tower. We're just everyday educators just like you. And we've got two avenues that I'd love for you to connect with us. Number one is that if you're not getting our emails, if you just go to KeithRN.com, on the top of the homepage, there's a case study, a free download. If you're just looking for something free, get started. We've got a rubric to assess clinical judgment that's also brand new, that aligns with the Tanner's framework. That's a very powerful resource to score a student's performance on a case study. But the bottom line is, if you opt in for that case study on the top of our homepage, you'll get on our email list and we'll stay in touch. And we don't spam you. We just give you relevant and helpful information on a regular basis. And then secondly is our Teachers Transforming Nursing Education group. We're now over 17,000 strong. It's a group that I started about 6 years ago when I started my dissertation at William Carey, and wanted to stay in touch, and it just has grown. And we're now 17,000. It's a powerful community.
I think it's actually over 18,000, Keith.
Wow. Yeah. So if you're not a member of that, you must. Yeah, I would say that's a no-brainer, because it's not just Keith, or Maria responding. It's really, you've got a supportive community there that really, if you ask a question, you'll get dozens of responses. There's people sharing their work. There's literally dozens and dozens of handouts as well that educators have shared over the years. So it's a really practical resource to create community. So really, as I look at, I'm 61 years old, I'm getting more gray. And as Maria knows that I've shared, I'm tired. But I'm excited about just, the opportunity to have a community that, however long I live on this earth, it's going to last. It's going to keep going and making a difference. And so I just want you to know that community is there to support you. And it's bigger than Keith. It's really about 17,000 as a member, as fellow educators, just supporting each other. And it's very engaging. It's not like one of these Facebook groups where it's like, you're just kind of like, it's like crickets. There's no crickets here. And there's a lot of interactivity. So you're supported there. You're cared for. And the struggles that you can share stay there. So that's, did I miss anything, Maria?
No, that's it. That's it.
Awesome. Well, is there anything that you'd like to say in closing, Maria? I
want to say thank you. Thank you to all of you that are here. You were very engaged. We appreciate your feedback. And I will say, if you want to continue the conversation, you have more feedback for me, please email me. I'm happy to jump on a meeting like this and have a conversation. As I said, I'm fairly new to KeithRN, so I love talking to our customers. I love talking to educators and hearing what you need. That's the only way that we're going to get better. And that's the best way for us to be of service to you, is to hear from you and have your input. So thank you so much. We appreciate you.